Okay, we are live
We
with
are
ProPresenter Power Talks. My name is Sheik Mozart, and with me, as always, is the ProPresenter Poppy,
Poppy.
none other than Stephen Andrew Dirks in the house.
What's
And and
Andrew? Where did Andrew
sorry,
come
Steve,
from?
that's your middle name.
Oh, it's my middle name? Oh, really?
Yeah, you know how we always talk about how your initials are sad.
Steve and Andrew Dirks. That's good.
And Steve, today we are talking about Easter or Resurrection Sunday. For those that don't know what Easter
It's
is,
go time.
and
Super Bowl week.
it's go time, baby. We are 6 days away. Well, some people, you might be having services on Friday and
Oh
Saturday.
yeah.
Might be having a Good Friday service. There. So for some folks, it's less than that. Or maybe you're doing an Easter egg hunt on Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to talk about using ProPresenter to maximize your Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday experience. And Steve, I'm excited,
You're
and
excited?
I'll tell you why, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah. Why
Um,
are you excited?
this is this is my first year, uh, my first Easter not on church staff. Well, no, that's
Oh,
not true. Last year actually was my first one, but
this is your second
now
one.
every year feels like, yeah, every year feels like the first.
Feels like a whole new life, right?
Yeah,
But you're still getting that Easter crunch because you're doing custom work with us. By the way, Baller Shake is one of our baller producers on church
yep,
visuals.
the ballast.
So,
Yep.
anyway, all that to say is, don't worry. Shake is still getting the Easter crunch. There's some projects that
Yeah.
he and I talked about a little bit ago that he still got to pump out today, tomorrow, the next day to
Let's
get
go.
ready for the weekend. So
Yeah.
you're still feeling that. You get to
And,
still feel
but
that rush, that Easter rush.
yeah, but it's different.
That is
You
true.
know,
That is true.
it's not like, I don't know. It's different. It's different, Steve. It's a lot less physically taxing for one.
Right.
Um,
You mean you're not
you know,
loading in like LED walls or,
right, right.
right.
Or in my case, it was stuffing a bunch of Easter eggs.
Right. uh,
It's
I
just it's
still do.
different.
We still did that this weekend. My wife and I egged our in-law, or my brother and sister-in-law's house for the niece and nephew. So we stuffed.
Oh, you guys do that?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
we stuffed like
nice.
50 Easter eggs and took things over. So yeah, don't worry,
Oh, that's great.
don't worry.
That has to be is that a northern thing?
Oh no, it was my wife's thing, so it was great. They loved
Oh,
it. They
okay.
loved it. It was it was
Oh, that's
it was a
great.
way to
That's nice.
love on my niece and nephew. So yeah, man.
Oh, qué lindo.
So today we kind of thought we would go in like the Easter prep setup, like
Hmm.
setting you up for
Yeah.
Easter well. So what do you think we should cover first, my man? You wanna which way do you think we should go?
Well, you know what? Let's start with your thing,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap up with just some like quick bullet points, last minute Easter details, Easter tips.
Sweet. And I posted this on social media for any of you guys who are tuning in. If you're tuning in live, we hope you are. If you have questions, I'd love for you to drop those in the chat. Like Shake and I are both watching the chat. We'd be happy to deviate and answer a question for you to help serve you in your church
Right.
this week. So if there's anything that like you'd like to cover, we'd love for you to be a part of dictating that conversation. ProPresenter Power Talks is not meant to just be Shake and I coming up with the topics all the time. We'd love to hear what would be most
Yeah.
beneficial and serve your church. But we didn't get any feedback, and so what I thought I'd do is show you guys a little bit behind the curtain of a church that I serve. So I work for Church Visuals full time. That's my full time thing, as helping lead our team and helping serve churches each week. We still have some churches this week that are working on Easter content that we're working on finishing up this week. Some lyric videos, some elements for services, and so deep in the throes of that. But on the side, obviously
Mm.
have dabbled with ProPresenter. That's the reason I've been dubbed ProPresenter Poppy. And so I have a church that I was on
Right.
staff with that I serve as the ProPresenter kind of setup guy. I'm not there every Sunday because obviously I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this church is down in South Carolina. And so I get the opportunity, the privilege of just supporting them remotely with content. And so this week they're loading in an LED wall, and so the LED wall is going to be in the shape of a cross. So I thought what I'd do is show you guys how I would go about, how I'm going to go about starting to create the content for that. I've already kind of done that, but a little bit behind the scenes. But I thought I'd walk you through the steps of what I'm doing to create the setup for that, how I'm going to manipulate content to go onto that screen, and kind of get into some nuts and bolts. Obviously, some of this will be a little bit intensive, but there's some things that I think could carry over. One, adding new screens. So if you're adding new screens this week, what I'm going to show you would help you do that. Formatting content differently for a new screen. So if the new screen is in a weird orientation, doing what I'm doing can help you set you up with that. We're going to dive into some looks on how you can set up looks to actually display content consistently across that whole entire screen consistently for you. So I'm going to dive into this real quick. We're not going to try to spend, this we could probably go on for hours talking about this, but I'm going to kind of just do a quick kind of, 15, 20-minute setup version. If you have any questions, Sheik will be watching the chat. He can ask me if Sheik has any
Mm.
questions that you think might be helpful for you. And then we'll wrap up at the end with kind of more of a general overview of some prepping tips, and then also some Sheik tips as well, as Sheik was in kids
That's right.
ministry, and ways that you can prepare your kids ministry, your student ministry well. So hopefully this is helpful for you. So I'm going to share my screen. You guys can see that. Sheik, can that look good on the screen? I think we can see this. Hopefully. Okay. Okay, cool. So you just tell me if it doesn't come up and if it looks weird, but you should be good. Okay, cool. Sweet. So the first things first is we're obviously bringing in a new LED wall. It's going to be figuring out what resolution is. Now, I've already talked with the team at this church that I work with, and the discussion has been that it'll be a 1920 by 1080 screen send, but it'll then be kind of masked to fit the cross, because they're going to send a 1920 by 1080 frame, but the panels will only be activated for the cross section. So I'm going to show you guys kind of setting it up. There's going to be some work later on tonight and tomorrow with this church to kind of dial in exactly what the resolution specs are, and you would have to do the same. But let's go ahead and start. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a screen. So you go to your ProPresenter settings, which you can do by hitting Command comma or going into the top left and selecting ProPresenter. Yeah, so I know that we're going to do a 1920 by 1080 large frame, and then we're going to put the cross in that frame, if that makes sense, into those specs. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, yeah, the cross should be a 1920 by 1080 send, is what I've understood. Now that could change. They're installing today. I could find out it's a 4K cross, but the initial idea was to just send a 1920 by 1080 frame and and have the cross flipped vertically. And so I'll show you kind of how to go about that. So we're going to kind of plan that that's the case. So what we're going to do is first create a new screen. So you'll hit this plus button on the audience, because it's going to be an audience screen that people can see. So I'm going to hit this. I'm going to just do a placeholder for right now. I'm going to do a 1920 by 1080 placeholder. And that, you'll see, makes a 1920 by 1080 frame right here that you can see. I'm going to label this cross, and I'm going to label the screen cross as well, so we can easily see that. But here's the thing, and this is the part you'll have to kind of play with when you're installing. If you have this company, I believe they're getting the LED wall from, should have a scaler, which would allow me to do this. What I really want to do is actually flip the screen to a vertical orientation so that I can set up the cross the way that so what I want to do is flip this to 1080 by 1920. So now I have a vertical cross, and what I'm going to do is send it out HDMI, you know, normally, and then have the scaler flip it around to fit onto the screen. I have to play with this. If you don't have a scalar switcher, going at the cross, you may have to actually do a 1920 by 1080 send, and then there's some ways to flip that around. Um, if that's something that you run into, you might shoot us a message. At the end, we'll drop our email. I would love to show you how you could actually kind of fake this a little bit and make the send a 1920 by 1080, but still see a correct version. So for our purposes, we're going to go ahead. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to show you is that we'll be flipping content around to show this. So I've set up the size of the screen as 1080 by 1920. You see that the orientation is there. Everything now is correct. You would actually select the output. So in your environment, you will actually need to select the actual output for that entire. So whatever physical device is connected to your computer, whether it's a Decklink Duo send or whatever, you'll actually have to select that. So like for here, for example, this is disconnected, but at the church, Decklink Duo 2 sends the center background feed. Sermon is fed with this placeholder for program is sent from Decklink Duo 1. So you'll actually have to physically select the output. I just titled it the cross, but you'll have to actually physically select what output, what HDMI port or what Decklink port is feeding that screen. So once you do that, this should all be set now. I have a cross, I have the correct resolution I want, and I have the audience. So first step is done. So I'm going to go ahead and close this window. So now I've got the screen setting set up. The second thing is this. That screen is doing the whole entire screen. So if that makes sense, like it's just taken the screen and moved it vertically. But if I were to send out of that screen right now, see this? It's sending everything out that way, if that makes sense. So you see that the whole entire screen is sent out. That's not a cross. That's a big screen turned vertically. So we need to figure out how do we make the cross out of that. And what I would do is do a mask next. So we'll go to the ability. ProPresenter has a mask editor, and you can create masks for different for use on different screens. So what I'm going to do is create a mask, and I'm going to title this cross. I'm going to change the resolution to the actual resolution of the cross, which will now pull that into a vertical frame orientation. And I can see that here. But now that screen is set up. And then what I'm going to do is create a rectangle, a black rectangle, and I'm going to now begin to create my cross by way of just duplicating these. So I'm copying and pasting, and I'm creating a cross in the way that I want it to look, like this. And you'll notice I'm using these grid lines to make sure these are all matched up accordingly. So they all are lining up to each other. So this is a perfect cross. If I want to increase the height a little bit of the cross, I can do that here. I can pull this up. Yeah, you probably will test it if you can get exact. Some churches you may have mapped it out in software and have an exact like measurement. And if that's the case, then you can get down to pixel size. So you can click here and go, this size is 365 by 514. You could manipulate those sizes to be exact. What we're probably going to end up having to do is set up an initial, and then I'm going to get feedback from them, and they're going to say, well, the panel is actually down farther here, so then I'll need to mask correctly. So then you can change the mask, and by using that, this is easy to change because I can just go in and make these changes, and then it'll take for that mask.
Then, or do they report
Yeah,
back?
I'll probably do a live session on FaceTime. We'll probably just get on a FaceTime call and look at it and have
Yeah.
some conversation because then I can easily make changes quickly. I have remote access to their machines using a software that I
Hmm.
use. So there's plenty of softwares you can use. I wouldn't suggest you use TeamViewer because TeamViewer is a free only for personal use, not for commercial. So for churches, it'd be commercial. So, purchase some sort of remote
Mhm.
option if you're helping a church remotely. But more than likely, you're at your church and you can help your church physically there.
Right.
But so this church will report to me via some sort of call or a discussion about, hey, this is still off a little bit, and we'll get it set. So we'll go ahead and get the screen set up. So we're going to just kind of go with this for right now. It may not be exact, but it'll get you the idea. So now this is the cross. So I have a mask. I have the screen set up. And so now the last step in the process is what we want to call looks. And the reason looks are important is because looks allow us to set up content on screens and kind of manipulate what that content's going to look like. So I'm going to create a new look. I'm going to title it Easter Cross, and that's going to be down here. You'll notice when I did this, it activated every screen, everything on every screen. And we don't necessarily want that because we're not going to be using the center screen anymore because the cross is going to be there. So I'm going to remove everything off of that feed. I'm going to remove this sermon feed here, and I'm going to limit what content goes to the cross. I don't want messages and props and the announcement layers going, and I don't want video going. So all I want is the slide content, which would be like your lyrics, and the media content, the graphical imaging content. And then up here, you'll notice a mask layer. This is where I'm going to activate the cross layer, the cross mask. So now when I click on this look, it's going to take this mask and it's going to set up the content in this way. I also want to format the lyrics the way that I want to specifically. So the way you do that is with themes. If I don't know if you remember, but we talked about themes a while back. You can create a new theme by hitting add, titling it. I've already created a new theme and I formatted this slide by way of selecting the cross size, so it flipped everything up. You'll notice here that the cross is still I copied in the text boxes from the mask layer just to kind of see how it lays out. I'm going to remove those. I have the text here, which is centered where the cross will be. I'm using Pragmatica Bold just for our sakes now to kind of test a little bit. Go ahead. It shouldn't. I would remove it before you go live once you've set everything up. But it shouldn't. It shouldn't do anything. It shouldn't do anything to it if you have it perfectly. But that requires you to change it in both spots. So all I did was I hit Command A. I copied all these text boxes. I went over to my theme. I came in here. I copied into this presentation all that. Why I say it's important to delete that is that if you make changes to the mask, these have to be changed as well. So that's why once you kind of set this, I would delete these, change your mask, and then you can just manipulate the text around where you want it. So this would be like lyric text that I'm kind of setting up here, and I'm going to set this up to be our lyrics. I'm going to go back to my show file. I'm going to go to my screens, my looks. I'm going to come in here to this Easter cross setup. I'm going to select that look from the Easter setup, and now the lyrics are going to snap to that specific spot. So here's how this looks now. If I trigger this stage display, this look, which I'll go to Easter, sorry, screens, Easter cross, you'll see here now that the cross mask has taken effect. There is a motion background here, and the text is, yep, yep. So so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and bring in some church visual content here that we have. I've got dynamic rays loaded to bring in. So I was thinking, just give me a sec. Let me load in. Yeah, you did that. So that was thank you, Sheik, for the dynamic rays content. You do it for the people. I know. So you do it. So, what we'll do is we'll not bring in the social content stuff. We'll just bring in the regular stuff. So, here's the last step. Um, you'll watch, once I select this, watch what happens. You'll notice that the screen, the content is doing 1920 by 1080. It's not flipping around. So, what I want to do is I want to, yeah, that's centered on the screen there. So, what I want to do is I want to flip that. So, I'm going to go to the inspector. I'm going to go into the actual settings of this video, and I'm going to rotate this video 90 degrees. I'm going to slow it down a little bit, and I'm going to close the window. And now you'll notice that when I trigger this, it goes across the whole entire cross. I'll set it as a background. Yeah, you'll have to do that for each one. So you can select all of them, hit inspector, and you should be able to do this. It should do it to all of them. It might just do it to one. You might have to manually go through. Yeah, it looks like you have to manually go through and do each one. So that's not great, but it is kind of a weird trigger you're doing. I mean, it is an abnormal screen size that's happening, so it's understandable that you might have to manipulate some stuff. So uh, you can now, and then what you also have to do is set these as backgrounds. Remember, I always have mine set as foreground so that when I input a video into ProPresenter last minute on Sunday, I don't have an issue. So this is where that comes into play, is that you'll need to make your stuff backgrounds. That way it actually be behind the text and loop it. And now you've got what you can see as the cross there. So then you can, at this point, you can begin to play around with, you know, manipulating. If you're like, man, I really don't want all this content on the screen. I really want it to be more dark, more, more of the dark space kind of look. You can kind of bring the crop in, and you can go with this kind of setup. You can crop and kind of play around with manipulating the content to fit across the way that you'd want it to. So this look will stay in effect until I change it. So you'll notice, all the lyrics continue to show up in this way. Here's where this is helpful is I know that maybe some of your churches are going to ask next, like, is, okay, well, I'm going to do the cross, but then how do I do the stream stuff? How do I make sure that that doesn't change? Well, the way you do that is by coming over here. You've got your stream program alpha set up to show everything. I'm going to select the modern look with the layout that I want, and I'm going to disable this, and I'm going to disable the media on that. And so now what you'll see is the cross is running, but you'll also notice that when I activate that look again, it removed the background, and the background is still going on the cross. So now I'm showing the same lyrics, but I'm showing them in different ways on different screens. Um, um, the functionality of the looks has been, I want to say that was right after I think that was initially with 7. So when 7 released, looks were a part of it. Some changes that have happened recently that have been really helpful is the ability to fade between looks. So you can actually fade between looks, which is helpful because I can actually, so for example, if I do a 0.5 second fade on this, and then I duplicate this, and if I want to blank the cross, so let's say you're going to start your service out with nothing on the cross, and you're going to build that in. Um, so for our sake, let's say that you're starting your service out with resurrecting, and you're going to be blank on the cross with no cross layer. And then when you do the resurrected king is resurrecting me. Now you want to fade into that cross. Before, if you activated a look, it cut to it. It immediately cut to it. Well, now if I click this, it'll fade the cross on. So you can actually cross fade between your looks. So if you start off with nothing, with the screen deactivated and not running, and then you want to cross fade, you used to have to do a series of go blank on the screen, change the look, and then come back live with content fading in. Well, now you can just fade looks on and off. So that's really helpful for a situation like Easter, where you may want to fade the cross in after a song has started at a climactic moment, kind of thing. And you can set how long that fade is. So if you want the fade to be, for example, 5 seconds, if I want it to be a longer fade, and I can go back here now, and I'll go, in your name I come alive, we're going to be black, blank across. The resurrected king is resurrecting me, and I'm going to fade on the cross, and you'll notice that it did not take because I must not have pushed enter. So you have to play around with making sure 5.0, there it is. So we'll change that. So if I'm blank, at this point, I'm going to just make this easy for us. I'm going to add look blank. And I'm going to make this audience look Easter cross. Okay, so I'm blank here. And then when I come live, it'll fade the cross on for 5 seconds. Pretty awesome. It's pretty cool. So yeah. So that's how I would set that up. And then at this point now, I'm ready to now get feedback from them on the resolution of the screen. Does it show up right? Is it actually manipulating the way that I want it to? Or is there something we need to change there? You wouldn't have to necessarily touch this again. You should be able to just go into your mask and change the way that your mask is functioning, hopefully, unless you find out that you don't have a scaler and you need to do some kind of reworking in that way. So yeah, that would be how I'd set up, a special element such as a cross or a weird screen. I mean, that would be a way that I'd do it.
Opens up a lot of possibilities for like textures and animations in that shape that you wouldn't have thought about really before,
Right.
because I'm thinking now, like, I mean, number one, you could potentially have a version of Jesus hanging on the cross at full scale,
Yeah. Yeah, you could
if you were going to do
you could
something like
custom
that.
create stuff for that. Um,
Right.
it probably, is tough this week, but if you have thought about this beforehand and you have custom content like
Yeah.
that you've
Right.
created with alpha channels,
Or that you call us
or
up.
you call us up, we can create with some alpha channels and you can layer stuff and do some
Right.
really cool stuff. So yeah, um,
Yeah, that's fun.
I know the church that I'm helping. They're going to do a lyric video, I think, in the modern service. So they're working on a lyric video that'll pop on the cross. So we'll have to do some kind of finagling with that to figure out where that lands. But that'll be
Yeah.
triggered using MIDI to fire on the ProPresenter
Mm.
machine. So yeah, create some cool stuff, some cool elements. Um, so yeah, and that's all done in ProPresenter, all within ProPresenter's engine, all within ProPresenter controlling that. Um, you can do some really cool custom stuff like that. So
At some point, it might be interesting to talk about using MIDI to control ProPresenter.
yeah, that's actually something I think we need to see if there's a guest who's done it. I've done it by proxy. So the church that I helped
Hmm.
did it at Christmas time, and it worked fantastic. And we learned some stuff. Like we had tried to do it back in the day when I was on staff, and we always had a little bit of a delay. And we found out that this past time, you have to do a couple of key things. One is you have to create a dedicated network for only your ProPresenter machine and the machine that's
Mm.
Ableton queuing. You don't want it to be in any sort of network that people can access because then it overloads and seems to
Yeah.
cause delay. So you want a direct connection to the computers via a network that's just directly dedicated for that machine. And then you also want to go into your setup, like your computer setup and network, and actually default the primary connection to be the Ethernet cable that is that connection. What was happening before is we never done that, and I think it was defaulting to Wi-Fi first, and then it would go to the other
Mm.
connection, and that was creating a delay. So there's some key things we learned. You have to do that, but I'd love to, if any of you have done that in our group, and would love to come on and talk about that. That would be an awesome discussion, just to see what you've done, how you set it up, how you set it up each week. I think it's a fantastic option to help. If you can get it set up robustly and correctly, you can potentially set up the ability to automate your lyrics with your Ableton machine on stage, which creates confidence for the band because they can kind of lead and drive how those tracks are set up.
Yeah.
So
And then nobody's having to follow along manually.
yeah, I would love to get to a spot in my church actually personally because it would just allow my ProPresenter operator to just stay engaged, but to not have to click every single button. To be
Right.
there for when there's a failure, to be there when there's an issue, but to not have to sit there and actually trigger every button. But you have to have the infrastructure set up to do it, and there's a
Right.
little bit of cost and a little bit of
Sure.
stuff associated
Yeah,
with that.
there's a church that I visited this past Sunday, and they were running tracks. They were queuing tracks and queuing like parts of the song, and something like that would be great for them because as they're queuing those sections of the song, then the lyrics could pop up theoretically
Yep,
in
yep.
an ideal environment,
In an
of
ideal
course.
environment for sure. So.
Yeah.
So as you know, that's kind of nuts and bolts getting set up for Easter. That might be something that you're doing today, tomorrow. Hopefully it's not the first time you're thinking about it. Maybe hopefully you've done some planning. But like Shake, what are some like tips, man, for you as you went into like an Easter week with your team, with your volunteers? What were things that you were
Yeah.
like, man, I need to do this well to set up people well for Easter, or things that you learned over years of ministry doing that?
Yeah, I mean, that position, the person running ProPresenter is so key in creating the environment in a kids ministry room, whether you're large group, I mean, I guess more for large group than small group. Um, and for me, because I tend to be very media heavy, I'm I love teaching from stage. I just think it's super important to kind of have both, and do both as well as each other. So that is a very, very important position, in my teams. Now, it helped obviously that I create media. I'm maybe not super familiar with ProPresenter, but I know enough that I can set it up. So I think ultimately the strategy in its simplest terms is setting up the team for success. And I think for me, the two most important ways that I would do that is number one, for me, Easter Sunday was not a time to try out anything new. You know, Easter Sunday is when you go to your classics. Now that doesn't mean you're doing the same stuff, but it's kind of a very similar format to what your team is used to.
Right, right.
And I tell you what, and I made this mistake one time, and this has nothing to do with ProPresenter, but it kind of was a big kind of mind changer for me. I tried to launch a new check-in system on Sunday morning.
Oh no.
And we don't have to go into how bad of an idea that is. I get it. But yeah, for me, Sunday morning, as far as the team is concerned, it's tried and true stuff. We're going to go to our greatest hits selection, and then also you want to make sure that everything is preloaded. There at different churches. My setup was always different. There was one church where we did rehearsals for Sunday morning before Sunday morning. So that was a way for us to kind of go through all the media pieces and make sure everything is there. At my previous church, we did not do that. So right before an hour before service starts or whatever, you're running through all those pieces, making sure that everything is there. Ultimately, you want to minimize surprises. For me, I want for my team that the Sunday morning experience, the Easter Sunday morning experience, be the most boring ever, like no surprises, no emergencies. And obviously that doesn't always happen, but I think if that's your goal as a leader, then you will minimize those surprises and
Right.
emergencies and having to put out fires. And I was big on being the live teacher or preacher in the room. So that kind of would freak me out a little bit because I know that there are points I I I love to be able to kind of run backstage and making sure or not backstage but behind the scenes make sure that that's perfect. But then there would be times where I couldn't do it. So it's important for me to minimize any potentiality of drama.
Yeah, if there's any week that you should go and have lunch with your team and talk through the week, it's probably this week.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
budget, take them out to a nice meal and like, hey, we're going to talk through
Yep,
everything that I'm planning and like what we're thinking of doing and
right.
what we're triggering. And if there's any week that you test everything twice, it's this week.
Mhm.
If there's any week that you have an extra rehearsal to make sure you're on the same page, do it. Like,
Right.
um, and you can make it fun. Like we would oftentimes Easter, we would like do like a meal. So like we didn't always do a meal like we did
Mhm.
donuts, but like I remember a lot of times when I was on staff, we'd have like a casserole. One of our wives would make a casserole, and we kind of do it big and say, hey, like we're gonna get here extra early on Easter so that everything's running, so we have
Yeah,
plenty of time to test something if something goes wrong or isn't working. Um,
right.
so we tested it Wednesday, but we're going to come in, and normally, we're in at 7:30 on Sunday, but we'd love for everyone to get there at 6:30. And the reason is we're going to test
Mhm.
everything, make sure we're good, and eat a meal together,
Right.
and just enjoy, and hopefully set a tone of like everything's good, everything's solid, we're ready to go. And then,
Yeah.
hopefully Easter is the day where you're so set up that you're not running around with your hair on fire up until the countdown
Yeah.
starts. You know.
And and it was fun, as intense as it could be, and as much of a big deal as it is. When you have a team and you guys are all working together to achieve the same goal, especially when it's intense. I mean, it was. I can't recall having an Easter Sunday morning that I didn't enjoy. Besides that one where I tested the new check-in system, that was not fun.
Well, Easter's always fun to me just because what are we celebrating? We're celebrating
Right.
the biggest news of our life is that Jesus has
Yeah.
conquered the grave, that our sin it's been overcome. Like it's the best thing ever. Like I mean, if
Right.
there's any Sunday that you're roaring to go, it's Easter. I have my Easter playlist that I usually listen to on the way to church, and I can remember, yeah, usually it's Easter. I wake up, I'm ready to go. That's not one of those days that I'm having to drag myself
Yeah.
out of bed. Like I'm ready to go. Like let's go. So, um,
What's on that playlist? Hee haw, I'm a donkey.
yeah. So I'm weird. I've got some weird ones. So I'm a Keith Green fan. So Arise My Love,
Wow.
Arise My
Yeah.
Love by Keith. No, so the Easter Song by Keith Green, and then Arise My Love by New Song. Uh, my
Okay.
wife makes fun of me. That's the one with the shuffling soldiers' feet guarded the grave. Um, so yeah,
Do you do any
so
Carmen? Sundays all the
I don't
way
have
by
any I
Carmen?
don't have any Carmen on there. Usually I go from there
Oh.
to North Point. Uh, Death Was Arrested is another favorite of mine.
Mhm.
I love that song. And then usually it's like into like yeah, Hillsong, Hillsong or
Mhm.
Passion, like Resurrecting, some of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's not an extensive playlist because usually it was like a 20 or 30-minute ride. So I listened to a few songs that were like my go-to Easter stuff that just got me jazzed.
Sure.
So yeah. One other thing I would say is test your video content extensively. So if you're loading in
Hmm.
content like what I'm doing with this church, test the content. So like, they're loading in stuff today. I'm sure that they'll be giving me a call tonight to talk through some stuff. I'm gonna load up their Good Friday service tonight and their Easter service. Probably start prepping that too. Um, because by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we want to be testing the stuff, firing it on screen, getting feedback. Because by the point Friday, Saturday rolls around, you don't want to be like trying to guess and make sure the
Mm.
stuff's right. Because if you get to Sunday, then
Right.
it's just a mess. So you want to have
Yeah.
everything set. You want to be happy with how things are looking. If there's any week to do a Q to Q, if your church is running lights and the church I'm at here in Pittsburgh is smaller. We don't really go Q to Q, and so we won't do that. But there's the ability to think about just for you if your church is running lights and audio and all these different pieces, clicking through different Q, clicking through stuff with your worship leaders and with your team to make sure it's exactly how we want it is a good idea to do. Um, and I'm a little different than you, Shake. I'll roll out new stuff. So like I'm probably going to roll out a
Hmm.
different lyric look this week for Easter. Probably go with that
Yeah.
Pragmatica look, and on the wall I might do some like outline text instead of filled text. But don't roll out something new that you aren't confident in and that you haven't tested.
Hmm.
And also
Right.
like yeah, that's something to think about is that like use stuff leading up to. So I've done some testing of a lot of this stuff, in the
Hmm.
past year. So I'm confident in rolling out with ProPresenter looks and doing different looks and
Right.
triggering different things because I've done it. I've done it. I've played around with it. I've used it for
Yeah.
baptism services and transitions, and we transition our screen in during a service. So I played with the fades between looks and some of that stuff. So um, don't necessarily, if you've never done what I showed you before, don't necessarily try to do everything. Maybe there's one or two things that I
Hmm.
showed you today that you could implement. And you could test it really well and be ready to do that. But then maybe, moving forward, use the summer to test out new features and to try different things so that you're ready
Yeah.
for, back to church or for Christmas this year or for Easter next year to actually do something. So don't just like roll out something new unless you're confident in it. If you're confident in, what might be really cool this week is to, play with different looks, different text looks. Those are pretty simple. Maybe you can play with different looks for different screens, text wise, and how it handles things. Maybe that's kind of your,
And
and that's a pretty easy step. But don't try to bite off an elephant
yeah.
you can't chew and try to do everything in one swoop.
And what I love too about Easter from a team perspective is that it has the ability to set a new bar for you,
Hmm.
as a team, because all that effort and all that intentionality that goes into that Sunday, in my opinion, could then become the baseline moving
Right,
forward.
right.
So that you're always pushing and always kind of growing as a team.
Yep. Yeah, so if you are going to roll anything out new, test it this week heavily to make sure you're
Yep,
fully confident.
heavily.
If you have already
Right.
tested some stuff, man, roll it out. Like, try something new. Try to create something new. Don't do the same because, I mean, for me, the reason I'm going to change up some lyric looks this week is the grave's empty, man. Like everything's changed. Like that's this Sunday, so I can help kind of create that energy in
Right.
visual just by changing the look of hey, what you came in last week, it ain't the same this week. Like this Sunday's special.
Right.
This Sunday's different. And I may go back to something, but for this Sunday, I want to try to kind of create a little bit of like, hey, this is new. So test that out, test your content, and then I think the only thing I would say is this is the Sunday to consider having backup plans and like backup plans that are set
Yeah,
up.
for sure.
Like don't just say, well, if something happens, I'll go grab that speaker from that. No, this would be the Sunday to be like, yeah, we always rely on this ProPresenter machine, and sometimes it glitches out. Man, we have another ProPresenter machine ready to go and ready to switch
Hmm.
to it. Like loaded, show files are all loaded, everything's ready. You'll just find that, this Sunday of any to think through everything that could go wrong
Hmm.
will oftentimes save you a lot of headache on the day of. So
Sure.
Easter and Christmas were days that I was like, if something fails, what's my backup plan? And if that fails, what's my
Right.
triple backup plan? So for me, if this computer fails, I'm cutting to, I have this secondary computer sitting right next to me that I'm going to cut to. And sure, people may notice the slide was off, but really quick, I'll be able to recover from it. And then if that fails, I've got my machine loaded up with files that if I had to, I could plug in, unplug the one and plug in and be off to the races. So like having redundancy thought through will save your Easter. Like, because now you'll know,
Yeah.
okay, I'm good to go. Like, and obviously, if all that happens, it's catastrophic. But like, just knowing, hey, I've thought through a little extra. I've thought through a little extra,
Right.
and I've tried to prepare for this Sunday to be the best possible distraction-free environment. And I put a little extra time and energy into that than I normally do. So,
Yeah. At some point, it's like it's just destiny, you know.
but yeah. So, and then yeah, planning center, planning center. Shake the Jew. Were you a big planning center guy back in the day?
No, not really. I would always just kind of type out all my notes. I always had a pretty good sense. And I had somebody on my team who was kind of in charge of the team itself. So they would kind of run the volunteer stuff as far as like my order of service. I would always just kind of type that out separately.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Well, if you are doing that, make sure that's one thing about that method that was always concerning for me is making sure the latest updates are sent to your team and notating
Mhm.
if a update's changed. With ProPresenter, it's great. If you aren't using ProPresenter, ProPresenter allows you to create order of services, add different people to it. When you change
Schedule
those, yeah,
folks.
schedule folks, which you probably would have a hard time this week rolling that out if you have, but it could be helpful for an order of service,
Yeah.
allowing you to clearly see an updated version of the order of service. When changes are made,
Right.
everyone sees it. So, um, yeah, those are always helpful for volunteers to have that mapped out accurately. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I mean, have fun with it. Be creative.
Right.
Be creative. Think about what are maybe it's a trivia video, trivia countdown. You've never played one of those. Maybe that would be something that's helpful for your church. Other things that you've never done before that would be fun to add to this year's slate. Um, don't always just think through, well, this is what we've always done. What are things that we can do different? So, yeah, man. Easter.
Yeah, for
Let's
sure. I
go.
love that.
Let's go.
Easter. Let's go.
Let's go. Think about it. And yeah. Well, we didn't have any questions pop up, but if you have anything as you're thinking about stuff throughout the day, uh, or tomorrow that you want to shoot our way, let us know. You can reach out to us at ProPresenter at churchvisuals.com. If you just email us there, Shake and I'll get that. And we'd be happy to respond to your church and help you in whatever way we can, setting you up this Easter to make it the best ever. Um, if you are looking for content last minute, we have a bunch of content that we've uploaded to our site, including this dynamic raise pack. You can download that a la carte, subscribe to it, and be ready to plug and
Mhm.
play that content in your service. Um, and then, yeah, if you have ongoing questions, topics that you think we should cover, we would really love to see if there's people that you'd love to hear from. We'd love to reach out to have some guests on the show. So if there's some people that you think we should talk to that would love to join our discussion and talk about ProPresenter, how we can serve the church well with that, let us know. We'd love to hear who you'd like to hear from. And we plan to be back next week. It's April Fool's Day, so that's not a joke. We'll plan to be
Nope.
back next week. Don't know what we'll cover. We'd love to leave that open and let you guys decide if there's something that you want to cover. Maybe a couple of you want to join the live stream and share. Maybe we do a Zoom call and you want to share about what went well on Easter. A few of you
Yeah.
want to do that. Let us know. We'd love to do that
And celebrate.
and celebrate. That'd be great to make that kind of a different flow than it has been. So just let us know if you're interested in doing that. ProPresenterChurchVisuals.com, or feel free to comment in the video. I don't know if any of you guys are aware, but we are posting these videos on our site as well. So these videos are also available at churchvisuals.com/training. You can access the show files there as well. And yeah, so man, Shake, do you want to like pray for everyone who's like just serving
Yeah,
and
of
maybe
course.
watching? Just end with like just a quick prayer, man, for Easter is a big week. I know it's probably crazy, a lot
Sure.
of people, and so yeah, just pray and then we'll wrap up that way.
God, we are so thankful for the season that we get to celebrate the story of your resurrection and ultimately the story of our salvation. Um, I pray, God, that you would empower every person, every tech person, every media director, every media pastor, whatever their role is. I pray that you would empower all of us to communicate that story and that message in a way that's as engaging and connecting as possible, that ultimately your name would be glorified, Father. I pray that we would be operating outside of our skill level, that we would be operating in your power and under your anointing, and help us to share the love and the message of Jesus with all the people that step into our churches this weekend. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Jesus is alive. Let's go.
Boom! He's alive,
Let's
baby.
go. Sweet. Well, I'm stoked, man. Best week ever.
That's right.
Sweet. Well, we're praying for you. I love what Shake
Yep.
said and prayed over you guys. Pray that would be a blessing to you and your church this week. We'll see you guys all next week.